The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Lara found it wedged between a utility bill and a flyer for half-off pizza. It stood out, thick, cream-colored, with elegant cursive embossed in gold. It looked expensive. It smelled expensive. She sat down at the small kitchen table, the one with the chipped corner and a cartoon sticker from her son still clinging to the side. She stared at the envelope. For a long time, she didn't open it. When she finally did, her breath caught. It was a wedding invitation, her sister Vivien's wedding. But then her eyes landed on the name. Not her name. It read Lara, just one letter off, but it felt like a punch to the chest. That wasn't a typo. That was a message. A quiet reminder you don't really belong here. There was no note, no, we hope you can come, no, it would mean a lot to us. Just a printed invitation, impersonal and cold, sealed tight like the family's affections. Lara laughed under her breath, not out of humor, but that bitter kind of laugh you make when you're reminded once again where you stand. Still, she placed it gently on the table. She didn't throw it away. A few minutes later, her son Luca came bounding in with his usual whirlwind energy. 8 years old, curious, bright-eyed, always looking for magic in the ordinary. He spotted the envelope. "What's that, Mom?" Lara hesitated. It's a wedding invitation from your Aunt Vivien." His face lit up like Christmas morning. "A wedding? Like with cake and flowers and dancing?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, just like that." "Can I wear my suit?" he asked. "The one from the school play?" Lara felt something ache deep inside her chest. That tiny suit, she had stretched 2 paychecks just to buy it so he wouldn't feel left out on class photo day. "Yes, baby, you can wear your suit." And in that moment, something shifted. The misspelled name didn't matter. The lack of warmth didn't matter. The icy silence of her family's invitation didn't matter. All that mattered was Luca's joy, his hope, his belief that this wedding could be something beautiful. Lara looked at her son and thought, maybe this is a chance. Maybe for once we can just fit in. Just a little. Hope is a dangerous thing, especially when you've spent a lifetime swallowing disappointment. But Lara held on to that fragile hope for Luca, even if it was just for one evening. Even if she knew better. Even if her name didn't belong on that envelope. Her heart still did. The dress wasn't new. It came in a plastic garment bag from a tiny consignment shop across town. It smelled faintly of lavender and someone else's memories. Lara hung it on the back of the bathroom door and stared at it for a long time. It was soft blue, not flashy, not trendy, just enough. Enough to pass as formal. Enough to hide the exhaustion in her shoulders. Enough to pretend for one night that she still belonged in rooms filled with crystal and champagne. She had stretched 2 paychecks to rent it, canceled a dentist appointment, returned a pair of work shoes, cooked dinner from canned soup and rice for 3 weeks straight. Not because she cared about fashion, not because she wanted to impress anyone, but because she knew that when she walked into that wedding, they would be watching, judging, whispering, comparing. And she refused to let them think she was broken just because she was tired. She pulled her hair into loose waves with a flat iron she'd had since college. The steam rose around her face as she leaned over the sink, brushing mascara onto tired lashes. In the mirror, she saw Luca behind her, standing in the hallway, practicing his smile. "Does this look okay, Mom?" he asked, grinning wide and exaggerated. She smiled back at him. "It looks perfect, baby." What she didn't say was, "You're the only reason I'm still standing." The dress wasn't magic. It didn't erase the ache in her back or the fear in her gut. But when she zipped it up, Lara didn't see a failure. She saw a woman who had survived. And for a moment, just a flicker, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, showing up could still mean something. The venue was stunning. White roses climbed the pillars like vines from a fairy tale. Gold-rimmed plates shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. A string quartet played something soft, elegant music that sounded like money. Lara held Luca's hand a little tighter as they stepped inside. He gasped. "It's like a castle, Mom," he whispered, eyes wide. "It really is." She smiled, even as her heart sank. A sharply dressed attendant checked the guest list, barely glancing up. "Table 9, he said, handing them a tiny card. Lara followed the signs through the grand room, weaving between glittering gowns and expensive perfume clouds. She passed table 2, then table 4, then 6. Table 9 was in the back, near the swinging door to the kitchen, right beside the restrooms. The music was muffled there. The air smelled faintly of cleaning solution, and the centerpiece was smaller, cheaper. Lara stood for a moment, pretending to adjust her purse so she could process it without letting Luca notice. "Is this our table?" Luca asked, already pulling out a chair. "Yep," she said, forcing a smile. "Table 9, VIP section, right?" He giggled. "That means very important people." "Exactly," she nodded, biting the inside of her cheek. As they sat, Lara glanced around. No one came over to greet them. Not Vivien, not even distant cousins. And then Judith, her mother. She walked by, regal in silver satin, clutching a designer clutch, and wearing that expression she always wore, as if the whole room were hers to command. Her eyes passed over Lara, not through her, over her, like she wasn't there at all. Lara didn't speak. She didn't expect warmth, but the absence still stung. Across the table, Luca was mesmerized by the chandelier above. "Mom," he said, "it looks like a spaceship made of stars." She smiled, but her eyes were wet. How cruel, she thought, that a child could find wonder in the very room where his mother was being erased. And how beautiful that he still could. Vivien floated through the crowd like a queen. Her dress shimmered like starlight. Her hair was perfect. Her laugh effortless, golden, loud, enough to reach every corner of the room. Guests followed her like planets around a sun, orbiting her with glasses of champagne and flattery. Lara sat quietly at table 9, adjusting Luca's tie while pretending not to notice the distance between her and the celebration. Then she felt it, a shift in the air. Vivien was walking toward her. Lara stood up instinctively. She straightened her dress, smoothed her hair, held her breath. Maybe this is it, she thought. Maybe she'll smile and say, "Thank you for coming." Maybe she'll hug me. Maybe... "Oh," Vivien said flatly, her lips curling into a polite half-smile. "You made it." Her voice was light. Her tone was empty. Then she looked down at Luca and added, "He's gotten big." No hug, no warmth, no "I'm glad you're here." Just those 3 words. You made it. Not a welcome, a confirmation. As if Lara's presence had been tolerated, not invited. As if she had shown up to something she wasn't quite supposed to see. And then, just as quickly, Vivien turned, swept back into the crowd, to her spotlight. Lara stood frozen for a moment, then slowly sat back down. Luca was smiling. "She looked like a princess," he whispered. Lara nodded, swallowing the ache rising in her throat. "She always has," she said softly. The clinking of glasses faded into a hush as Vivien stood. Her dress caught the light just right, her posture effortless, like she'd rehearsed this moment her whole life. She raised her champagne flute, her nails painted in a shade called bridal glow, and smiled at the room like she was born to own it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice smooth, warm. "This is the happiest day of my life, and I'm surrounded by the people who mean the most to me." Lara sat still at table 9, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked at Luca, who was perched on the edge of his seat, enchanted. For a fleeting second, Lara dared to hope. Maybe Vivien would say something kind. Maybe all the old wounds could be buried for one night. "Of course," Vivien continued, pausing dramatically, "I have to give a special shout-out to my big sister." Lara looked up. People turned to glance at her. Glasses lowered, forks paused midair. Vivien's smile widened. "She's always been an inspiration," she said, tilting her head sweetly. "A true example of strength. I mean, raising a child on her own. With no partner? No help?" Lara felt her chest tighten. Vivien's tone shifted just enough. "Really, it's incredible," she added. "A single mom, clearly unwanted by anyone else, and yet here she is." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not polite laughter, sharp, cruel, indulgent. Lara's heart dropped. She froze, blinking hard. Had she heard that right? And then her mother's voice cut through. "She's a used product," Judith declared, loud enough for half the room to hear. "But hey, she still polishes up well." This time, the laughter was louder, less restrained. Lara stared at her lap, her fingers clenching the napkin like it was a lifeline. Luca leaned in, whispering, "Mom, why did she say that about you?" Lara didn't answer. She couldn't. The laughter didn't fade. It spread, like a fire fed by dry leaves and too many flutes of champagne. At first, it was a ripple, a few awkward chuckles. But then someone clinked their glass. Someone else leaned back laughing louder, and suddenly the whole room was echoing with it. Lara sat frozen, her heartbeat pounding so hard she could barely hear. And then Judith's voice, clear and sharp as broken glass. "She's a used product," she said, almost proudly. "But hey, she still polishes up well." More laughter, this time louder, less hesitant, as if her mother had given them permission to laugh and they obeyed. Lara couldn't move. Her fingers clenched the napkin in her lap until her knuckles turned white. The room spun blurred around the edges, and for a moment she felt like a ghost inside her own body. But she wasn't invisible. She was exposed. She was being performed like a joke told too many times and always at her expense. Across the table, Luca looked up, confused, his little face twisted, not understanding. "Why?" he whispered, tugging her sleeve. "Why did she say that about you, Mom?" Lara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not a word, not a sound. Because there's no easy way to explain cruelty to a child, especially when it's coming from the people who were supposed to love you the most. Lara scanned the room, not for escape, but for something far more desperate. Eye contact, a single glance, a flicker of empathy, a face that didn't pretend not to see. But all she found were heads turned away. Someone checked their phone, someone else raised their glass too quickly, as if to hide behind the rim. Her cousin scrolled, pretending to read a text. Her grandfather, the one who used to call her his little lion, stared at his plate, unmoving. No one laughed now, but no one looked either. And that kind of silence, it cuts deeper than words. Lara felt like she was shrinking in her chair. Like her existence had been turned into performance not for celebration, but humiliation. A character in someone else's comedy, a cautionary tale in a sequined dress. And everyone in that room had bought a ticket. She wasn't a guest, she wasn't family, she was the punchline. And the punch had landed. Her hand gripped the napkin so tightly it trembled. The white linen twisted between her fingers, clenched like a rope she was trying not to drown beneath. It was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't speak, she didn't cry. She sat there perfectly still while shame poured over her like warm wine. But the sting wasn't from Vivien's words. It wasn't even from Judith's cruelty. The real pain, the one that drilled deep into her chest, came from everyone else. From the cousins who once braided her hair but now avoided her gaze. From the uncles who used to call her brilliant, now pretending not to hear. From the people she'd grown up with, who all chose to stay silent. That's the part no one warns you about. The moment you realize that silence can sound like betrayal, that when people look away, they are choosing not to see you. Lara looked down at the napkin again. It was creased, wrinkled, damp from the sweat in her palms, but it was still there, and so was she. Barely, but still holding on. The laughter had started to settle, not because people had stopped finding it funny, but because the cruelty had landed, thick, final. Lara was still frozen in her seat, the napkin crushed in her fist like a prayer no one would answer. She didn't see it right away, but then she heard it, a slow, deliberate sound, a wooden chair scraping against polished tile. The room stilled, forks lowered, conversations stopped mid-whisper. Even the string quartet went quiet. All eyes turned. Callum, the groom, had stood. Not hastily, not awkwardly, calm, intentional. He didn't look at Vivien. He didn't glance at Judith. His eyes locked straight onto Lara, and something in his expression made the room feel suddenly colder. Not angry, not performative, but quiet, heavy, like a thunderstorm that hasn't yet broken the sky. Lara blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but no, Callum was standing, and he wasn't smiling. Callum reached for the mic. He didn't ask, he didn't wait, he took it. The crowd shifted. The DJ hesitated, hand hovering near the volume control. But Callum raised his hand, not to dance, not to toast, to stop the music. His voice was calm, but it struck the room like thunder. "Ara," he said softly. Lara froze. "Don't go." The room gasped. Heads turned. Vivien stiffened. Judith's mouth dropped open. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened," Callum continued, slowly stepping away from the head table. "I won't stand here about to marry into a family that thinks cruelty is culture and shame is tradition." Dead silence. "If this is what family looks like, then I need to take a hard look at the kind of man I want to be." His words hung in the air heavier than crystal. "You mocked a woman who showed up with grace," he added, "who brought her son to your celebration, and you turned her into entertainment." He turned to Vivien. "You didn't just humiliate your sister, you humiliated yourself." The crowd didn't move. They didn't blink. Because in that moment, Callum wasn't just defending Lara. He was dismantling the whole room, brick by brick, mask by mask. "Not today," he said finally. "Not on my name. Not in my presence." Then, without looking back, he put the mic down and walked out. For a long moment, the room stood still. The mic was silent. The music didn't resume. No one said a word. It was as if the air itself had frozen. Lara slowly pushed her chair back. The sound was quiet, but in that moment, it echoed louder than applause. She stood up, not in defiance, not in anger, but with calm, with clarity. She reached for Luca's hand. He didn't say anything, just looked up at her, eyes full of questions he was too young to form. "We're going home, baby," she whispered, and that was enough. No dramatic exits, no harsh stares, no last words. Just steps, soft, steady, sure. As they made their way toward the door, the crowd parted instinctively. Some looked down, some looked away, and some looked like they finally understood. But Lara didn't need their understanding anymore. She didn't need their guilt. She had something stronger, peace, and the quiet strength of a woman who refused to carry shame that never belonged to her. 3 days later, a bouquet showed up at Lara's apartment door. No grand roses, no flashy lilies, just a quiet bundle of wildflowers, sun-speckled, imperfect, alive, tucked inside a small card. Only 4 words. To the lioness. Lara didn't need a name. She knew who it was from. She placed the flowers in a chipped vase by the kitchen window, where the morning light would hit them just right. That night, after dinner, she was brushing Luca's hair before bed. He was unusually quiet, thoughtful. Then he looked up at her in the mirror. "Mom," he asked, "are you still sad about what Aunt Vivien said?" Lara paused. Her reflection blinked back at her stronger than she remembered. "Not anymore," she said. Luca nodded, then shrugged in that simple, childlike way. "Because you," he said, "even though it wasn't a fight." Lara smiled. Not the kind of smile that needs to be seen, but the kind that lives deep in the quiet parts of a person. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Exactly." The wedding photos disappeared from Vivien's feed. No public statement, no explanation, just quiet deletion as if the night had never happened. She never reached out, not even once. But Lara didn't expect her to. She didn't wait by the phone. She didn't draft imaginary texts that would never be sent. Some silences are answers. A week later, Judith called, not to apologize, but to blame. "You embarrassed us," she snapped. "You didn't have to be so dramatic. You could have laughed along." Lara didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She waited for her mother to finish. And then she said evenly, "I'm not your scapegoat anymore." That was it. 5 words. Not shouted, not rehearsed, just spoken. And somehow they echoed louder than any speech Vivien had ever made. Judith went quiet. Then she hung up. Lara stood in the kitchen, phone still in hand, heart still. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She felt clean. Like she had finally walked out of a room where the air had always been poisoned. Days passed. The wedding faded into whispers and awkward silences. But something small had shifted in Lara's home, something permanent. Luca had a new game. He'd line up his action figures, Spider-Man, Batman, a headless Iron Man, and stand tall in front of them with a plastic spoon for a microphone. "I won't stay silent," he'd declare, puffing out his chest. Cruelty is not tradition. Lara would watch from the kitchen doorway smiling. He didn't fully understand what had happened that night, but somehow he felt it. He had seen strength. And it wasn't loud, it wasn't shiny, it didn't need a spotlight. It simply stood up when it mattered. One evening, while brushing their teeth, Luca looked up at Lara through the mirror. "Mom," he asked, "are you still sad about what Aunt Vivien said?" Lara paused, toothbrush mid-air. She looked at him, this little boy with an old soul and wide, wondering eyes. "Not anymore," she said. He nodded, then said it so matter-of-factly it almost broke her heart. "Because you don't need people to clap for you to know you're brave." Lara smiled, the kind of smile that goes all the way down to your bones. In that moment, she understood. She didn't need their acceptance. She didn't need their praise. She only needed truth. And the quiet, steady freedom of finally living as herself. No more shrinking, no more explaining, just standing and being seen, first by her son, then finally by herself. Sometimes the loudest victories come without applause. This story reminds us that dignity doesn't need permission. You don't have to shout to be strong. You don't need to fight to win. True strength is walking away, not in defeat, but in self-respect. And sometimes the most powerful legacy we can leave is simply showing the next generation how to stand tall even when the world tries to make us small. You don't need their validation. You only need your truth. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated, then you're not alone. Here on Pieces of Soul, we tell the stories that break silence, challenge expectations, and remind us who we really are beneath the noise. Hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, and join a community where your truth matters. Your voice, your journey, your soul has a place here.